Down here in a while, you have to remember how long it takes you. to
Yeah.
get-
Just go through everything.
Oh, my God.
I know, I was like, oh, that is going fast.
I was unsure I was on the right floor. I'm like, I thought it was the 19th, but I saw Liquor Control Commission set up, but I'm like, well, maybe it's not.
We were 1948 before that, weren't we, or something?
So
Yeah,
yeah,
balance
between 48 and 60.
So, yeah,
48, 60, but then the
Ten-
management office said, well, we can't give that
Yeah,
to you
we're on
all
both
all year.
four into right now.
We had seen this room, I thought it was pretty nice.
Backpack.
Is there a-
Yeah, I think it was for like, I
10.
think I was watching.
Well, yeah, 1932 is good. This works out well.
Okay,
Fine. Yeah.
That's good.
Since we now have 19 and 30, because.
All right, we're now calling to order the July 14th meeting of the Ohio Elections Commission. Mr. Executive Director, please call the roll.
Ms. Tavares,
Here.
Ms. Hagan,
Present.
Mr. Lyle.
Here.
Mr. Prince. Present. Mr. Knights.
Here.
Vice Chair Kaufman.
Here.
Chair Beatty.
Here.
All present, sir.
The first order of business will be the approval for the regular meeting minutes from the June 30th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Given that there's been a motion that's been duly seconded, is there any further discussion on that motion?
Just one question.
Okay.
Mr. Executive Director, I sent you like a note on the, with Mrs. Tavares when she was in and out.
Mhm.
Is that, I didn't get a chance to look at that, but that did.
Oh, as it relates to the votes?
As it relates to the votes and when, because there was one, there's one or two.
You're right, I did, yes, I did not, I did,
I didn't vote on one of them.
right,
because I-
yeah, and I had reflected, he pointed out, for the record, you pointed out that the Florima case reflected a 6-0 vote. I did change that on what we are approving here today. It's 7-0. And then you also had a question concerning how the vote was reflected on the minutes, which is that it was approved by a vote of 6-0 because Ms. Hagan was not a part of the previous meeting. That would have been the May 19th meeting. And that's historically what we have done is not reflect, that person voting for the minutes since they weren't present. And I could, if you want me to, I could add the fact, but, as I look back at the minutes, that's something we've never reflected. It's just because, the minutes reflect how many people were present. So that's what we did. So anyway, but this time, it'll be a 7-0. Everybody's present, everybody was here last time.
Yeah, that went to the 6-0, but it didn't mention, she wasn't there, but it does in for an earlier one.
Okay.
So it was one but not both, or need to be consistent, right?
Right.
And say it was why. The
And I
other
did,
was-
and I think in that one, he Faker, I think Mr. Faker was the gentleman. And that's the one we continue to vote on, and that's reflected.
Great.
Yep, that's all.
Is there a motion? We need a
Oh, yeah,
motion
we
to
had,
change
Mr. Lyle made the
all those
motion,
changes.
Ms. Tavares, seconded. There's one vote.
Any further discussion? You're out of practice on something else. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Yes.
It automatically goes with an audit.
Yeah.
Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Okay, before we go to the group considerations, is there any other thing we need to handle?
No, that's it. We're, as I indicated, there were originally scheduled some other preliminary review matters that were all canceled because, for a variety of reasons, one, either person just couldn't attend, had conflicts, or I'm kind of working out some other things on some other cases. And so those are all off. So all we have are the groups, which we have before you, and then we'll have the discussion concerning remote attendance once we get through the groups. The working agendas that you all have in front of you do reflect changes, even up to this morning. There's one case that somebody filed their report with the Board of Elections and submitted a response by fax that I reflected. And so, but that's on page 2. Page 1 has not changed from where I originally.
Okay, before we go to the group considerations, we just identify who is on the computer.
Yeah.
So we know if there's any of those individuals that have to do it in these cases that we can maybe move further in the agenda.
There is Seth Conrad, Dustin Ensinger, Shane Stegmiller, and we have a guest on there. That's all.
At least two of those names are press.
Correct.
Stegmiller and Ensminger.
Okay.
I'm not sure the first name, but my guess is none of them. And I don't recall. Did you say Conrad was one?
Correct.
There is no Conrad listed as a respondent. I don't recall seeing that name as treasurer, but it's certainly possible.
Why don't we just go and ask that person?
Tom, are you here for a specific matter, or are you just viewing?
I am just viewing.
Yeah, there's no one listed in the ICWs.
And then for guest, same question. Are you just viewing? Are you here for a specific case?
There's no Pearson. Normally, I guess the
Yeah.
answer I have is
Okay.
we normally do.
All right, that's fine.
So, yes.
Okay. All right, the first group of cases, the executive director has recommended to dismiss as the complaint is filed beyond the 2-year statute of limitations.
Before you start, I'll just
Yes.
quickly add, this is, I've never had to do anything like this before at this scale, but somehow I'll take certain responsibility for allowing to get into the database and us putting it before a meeting. In some regards, that's a good thing to deal with these, but to have so many all listed, where the referral from the county board was made beyond the 2-year statute of limitations. These were either for failing to file or a late filing of the 2019 pre or post general and or the 2019 annual reports. The due date for those, the latest due date would have been January 31 of 2020. And we received these referrals. On this batch from the Summit County Board of Elections on March 16th, which is beyond the 2-year statute of limitations. So the only equitable thing to do is dismiss all these matters.
Any comments or questions to the executive director?
Were these ever at any point addressed in a timely manner, or are they like outliers that didn't?
I don't know, because in looking, if you were to actually go through some of the ICWs and look at prior cases, Summit County Young Democrats, I'll pick that one out. Just because I see it, it's the last one on the bottom. But there are certain other individuals who've been referred by the board for like the 2020 annual report. I don't think we have any for the 2021, or maybe even a pre or a post. DeAndre Forney is another name that I recognize that have been referred to us in the past, the recent past, for missing reports. But why they did this, through this period, I don't know. I honestly haven't talked to the staff at Summit County. Summit County is normally one of those boards that's pretty good about referring matters to us on a timely basis and getting things to us regularly. And there were a few other cases toward the beginning where if you look at the good cause list, we're kind of getting ahead of myself here, but Talmadge Democratic Club, I think Robert Ball. Yeah, I mean, you see Twinsburg, Snow, Barberton, all of those were for late filings of the 2021 either pre or post general, where the reports were filed, but they were just a couple days late, so they're in the good cause listing. So, Why they included all these, I don't know the answer, unless they just looked at them and said, hey, these folks didn't file those either, even if we haven't otherwise referred them, we're gonna go ahead and refer them again, so.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all cases, that I'll be going through, start with 2022 R. 16 through 59. And then that would be case number 2022 R. 152, 153, 154, 155, 156, 157, 158, 159, 160, 161, 62, 163, 164. Madam Court report in here. 165, 166, 167, 168, 169, 170, 171, 172, 173, 174, 175, 176, 177, 178, 179, 180, 181, 182, 183, 184, 186, 187, 188, 189, 190, 191, 192, 193, 194, and 195.
Order for you. No outliers.
Well,
Do the commissioners have any questions or comments on any of these matters? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move that we follow the recommendation of Executive Director.
Second.
There's been a motion, has been duly seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Raise my hand.
Any abstentions? None. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Okay, the next category of cases, the executive director has recommended find a violation, but for good cause not impose a violation or refer for prosecution. Mr. Executive Director, any comments on the next list of cases?
Normally I am making this recommendation when persons have filed a report and their response is submitted, or the filing was made within a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, somewhere around there. I think all of these were really within days of when they were to have been filed. So for whatever reason, I guess give the people credit for relatively timely filings, and they submitted their reports. And so I'm very comfortable with making good cause recommendations on these cases. And this is also the first time these people have been.
Any questions or comments before we go to the group? And hearing none, I will read the particular cases. 2022 R, 138, 139, 140, 141, 142, 144, 145, 146, 147, 8, 149, and 150. Do the commissioners have any other questions or comments on any of these matters? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll move the executive director's recommendation.
Second.
There's been a motion that's been duly seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, the same sign. Hearing all ayes, the motion carries by a vote of 7-0. The next category is the $50 fine category. Mr. Executive Director.
Yeah, these two cases, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the reports have been filed, but they were well beyond a week, 2 weeks, somewhere in that time frame. One was filed in June and the other, Todd Johnson just filed his this morning, according to the Board of Elections. And so the reports have been filed. A response was provided to the commission on both cases, where they indicated the reason for the late filing. My recommendation is to find violation, impose a fine of $50. Also, both these matters are before both these candidates committees are before the commission for the first time.
Okay, we're speaking about case number 2022 R-196, 2022 R-199. Do the commissioners have any other comments or questions on these two matters? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move to accept the recommendation of the executive director.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion that's been duly seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Hearing none. All in. Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, the same sign. Any extensions? The motion carries by a vote of 7-0. The next category, the next case is in the $100 fine category. That will be case number 2022R-143. Mr. Executive Director.
In this situation, the respondent was only a few days late in filing his post-general election report, but no response was submitted to the commission, giving me an understanding of why the report was not timely filed. That's in circumstances where the recommendation is for the violation and impose a fine of $100.
Okay, do the commissioners have any other questions or comments on this particular matter? Hearing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
There's been a motion that's been duly seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The motion carries by a vote of 7-0. The next category of cases is the executive director's recommendation is $25 a day with a reconsideration option. That will be case number 2022R-197. Mr. Executive Director, comment, please.
The referral was for a failure to file, and the understanding of evidence that the report has not yet been filed. Since circumstances, I recommend the imposition of a per diem fine. This is the first this
Yeah, there's no priors.
respondent has been before the commission. Yeah, no priors. So I recommend that we find a violation, impose a fine of $25 per day until such time as the report is filed. But then give the respondent an opportunity to file a report, request for reconsideration, and we'll put it back before the commission.
How many days in excess of filing are they currently?
It's for a post-general 2021 report, so 6 months.
About 10, it says.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Commissioner?
It says 12/10/21. I'm sorry, I'm looking at it now. I see those.
Any further discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll move the recommendation of the executive director.
Second.
There's been a motion that's been duly seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same sign. The motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Okay, the last two cases, well, I'll take them group by group. We have a request to continue upon the request of Respondents Council. I'll use my discretion as the chair to allow them for that continuation. And then the next category of cases are where we are continuing for lack of service. Do you have any comment on these last meeting?
Not really. I mean, Alfonso Narvaez is one that has a whole laundry list of cases outstanding before the commission. I've had conversations with Lucas County Board as it relates to his failures, let's put it that way. They don't have a whole lot of explanation as to why, but we're gonna need to move forward on him at some point. Try and get him to move. He's running something up in Lucas County. And at one point, he was, I believe he was the treasurer for the Lucas County Republican Party, at least the listed treasurer. So that's the only one. Other than that, you know, folks did not, excuse me. We did not have good service on case item number 1 or item number 15. And so without good service, I didn't want to move forward.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the commissioners here?
And you have the ability to continue.
Yes. But any other questions or comments from the other commissioners on these? Okay, All right, I'll use my discretion as the chair to continue these matters.
Thank you.
Okay, the next order of business, done with the item of the docket, and the next order of business will be a discussion concerning the physical presence at a meeting of the commission. Mr. Executive Director, you produced a memo.
Yep.
So why don't you lead us, start in this discussion, frame the question.
I will gladly do so. This is something that had been raised by a couple of different people with me. One is Mr. Christopher Hicks, and the other was actually we had a somewhat lengthy conversation with Kurt Hartman, attorney out of the Cincinnati area who has regularly appeared before the commission.
He didn't have objection to me telling me he has a requirement of time.
I don't know, he might have. He'll survive it, I think.
He's very
careful
about it though.
You know, and so, and just thinking about those things, and thinking about other comments that we've all shared, I think, over the last, I guess I'd say 2.5 years since we started meeting remotely, and the increase in participation that we have seen. You know, I thought it was something that was worthwhile bringing up and having a conversation as we're about to have here at this point, and approaching whether it is something that we wanted to allow, and whether we wanted to allow it in a broad sense and have it so that everything that the commission does, people can do remotely, or have it on a more limited basis. And so, you know, what I've prepared to circulate to everybody, you have in front of you, is from the policy and procedure manual, where it talked about commission meetings. 1, 6, 7. And the first 7 paragraphs are what has been in the policy and procedure manual since it was created. Down through where it says members will be notified before the reporter will be scheduled for the meeting. That's always been, that's been there. What I have added is then after that, that's 1, 2, the 3 paragraphs after that, that discuss, you know, the obligation of commission members to be physically present. And then also whether we want to allow for the participation of individuals remotely, and how, you know, and how we want to do it. What I have written and prepared for you is, I think, a reasonable way of stating it. And the reason why you see the parenthetical phrase in there with kind of a comma that's out of I don't know if I want to say out of position, is because if you were to take that parenthetical phrase out, it essentially says, if we want to do it, all preliminary review matters, even, let's say, complaints that one person files against another for a failure to include disclaimer or a campaign finance violation or what have you, all of those would be, we would say, would be appropriate. Or if we, you know, if we include that parenthetical phrase, then what we're saying is county board referrals and Secretary of State referrals would be allowed to appear remotely. And I think that's where we saw the greatest increase in participation. And as I've said to other people, you know, kind of off the cuff, you know, looking at today's recommendation, if I'm recommending $100 fine against Scott Barr, and you know, he's got a choice between appearing remotely or driving essentially 4 hours, 2 hours down and 2 hours back. What's the person like that likely to do? He's more likely going to appear remotely, because then he could make a statement to the commission. It would potentially change my recommendation. That's a case that may have gone to a good cause had the person submitted a statement. But the likelihood of somebody like that traveling, again, 4 hours, come to a commission meeting here in Columbus is, I think, much less. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. The last paragraph that I added down there You know, what I'm essentially saying is, generally speaking, at least what I'm trying to say, generally speaking, hearings will be in person. Unless the commission determines that it wants to conduct a hearing through a virtual meeting. And that would be something that the commission would have to decide unanimously, whereas if the way I have it written at least is, if you wanted to allow a person to appear remotely, it only takes a majority of the members present to allow for that. The way, again, the way I have it written, if we want to do just board of elections referrals, and we only had 5 people present to create a quorum, and 3 people said, yeah, let's do it, then that would be sufficient, which is out of the ordinary for what the commission does. But for something like that, that's not really, it's more of a policy determinator than it is an actual vote by the commission as to finding a violation of enforcement statutes. But again, that I could change that as well.
I'm sorry, so this means the preliminary review would be heard, and then after preliminary review, we decide to take it to a full hearing. This deals with the full hearing that would subsequently occur, correct?
What I'm essentially saying, I think the way I have it written is, if we decide to set a matter for a full hearing, it would be in person, unless a unanimous decision of the commission was to allow for a remote full hearing.
Okay, well, let me let you finish your comments and do it.
And yeah, and I'm open to comments, and I'm open to how everybody wants to proceed on this. I believe, based on comments that people, that we've all discussed at various times, whether it's been something I've discussed with you individually, or as we have all experienced the increase in participation that we have all seen with remote meetings, that this is something that everybody seems inclined to try to do. It then just becomes a matter of us figuring out how we want to go about doing it, putting, let's say, this policy in place and going forward from here. So I'm open to discussion from everybody as to what we think is the best way to proceed and how we want to do it. So you're the chairman. You get to lead off here and ask whatever questions you want.
No, I'm gracious and I'll let Evan let him speak first.
Well, that's typical of you.
But I had just clarified that point while it's fresh.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, thank you, another question and comment. I guess for me, I'm about fairness and equity for all of our participants in commission hearings. And so that parenthetical phrase that's included basically says only those coming from county boards of election or the Secretary of State. I believe if we're going to open this up and allow for virtual, I would rather not have that phrase in there, to be fair to everyone, to increase participation for those who have case before the commission. And then just one comment in the 3rd paragraph at the top, I would take the by order of the chairman, I would take the man off and just put by order of the chair.
Oh, well, yeah, if we're changing the policy, then, okay, I understand where you're coming from. This was written
I know,
26
I know.
years ago. Thank you very much.
You should just make it chairwoman.
Well, it will be. In a few months, it will be.
Or- Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Go ahead.
What would least exploit the purpose of the commission politically, but still allow the transparency and the open access? I mean, is there a reason for that differential that you had intended between those coming from Secretary of State versus the other? What was the rationale behind that?
And I wanted to at least raise that point to have us openly discuss it, I guess, as much as anything is. There have been expressions made to me that when you have, I file a complaint against you, and you as the respondent would like to have the opportunity or ability to see me in person. and have a face between the two parties. Whereas with the county board of referrals and the secretary of referrals, that's not really the case. It's just a matter of the county referred you, and it's a matter of you telling, filing a report and saying, here's what it is. And so that's the only reason. But as Mr. Kreitz and I were talking briefly this morning before the meeting started, I raised that issue, but alternatively, if I file a complaint against him and we're township trustee candidates in some lost township trustee in Washington County, do we really want to bring both of those people here physically to do that when it could be done remotely? And that's the balance that we're talking about here, that, you're kind of talking about in terms of the equity of the situation. It's another thing to say, and maybe there's a way of working it, and I just do it effectively. Saying, if somebody files a complaint against let's go back, I'll reference Mr. Hicks, who filed complaints against the state Republican Party. Is that something that, if it's on a statewide basis or something like that, do we want to obligate that to be in person and obligate those parties to come together? And I don't have, personally for me, I don't have a problem doing it either way when it comes right down to it. But, that's something that I think it's appropriate for us to discuss as to how we want to approach that. And that's the main reason why I have that difference in there.
But I think that, excuse me, I'm sorry. Having done both, there are several of us that have done, saw Mr. Hicks in a situation, and I'm not just saying Mr. Hicks, I'm not saying anybody, but just because we have that reference. There are definitely nuances to the situations that we've seen, all of them, regardless of who has brought it, that I think it's been important for us to see some of those things and hear some of those things that might get lost in a Teams meeting. So I can see why you would think that that is something that that maybe we would look at on a case-by-case situation. Because I do think there's a difference between having someone come and explain why their reports were late and then having someone come and be able to explain why they feel that we need to, take someone to the next level of even prosecution or whatever.
Right.
Referring them for prosecution, not us, obviously, but
Yeah.
I just think that there are nuances when it is in that kind of situation that when they're in person, I think that it's just a little bit more, I don't know, it becomes clearer, or maybe that's just the way I process things, I don't know.
Mr. Chair, may I make some comments and I have a question?
Good.
So, I completely agree with the fairness and equity perspective. However, I'm a little bit challenged to open it up beyond the parenthetical for a different reason. If you make it too easy for one-to-one claimants to file against each other, you're going to have potential for more frivolous claimants, right? The difference between this and a courts can be local. Here, you got potentially a 3-4 hour commitment to do that. It raises the bar for what you're going to claim. And I want it to be fair and equitable, but I also don't want to see the room, filled with online folks that are just because it's easy and I can do it from my home.
Looking for something about social media.
Yeah, so, and hopefully we'll get into the technology aspects as well, right? I'm in favor of this, but I think the technology aspects have to be thought through, one of which being aspects, not having a chat room where it's a play for political points in the chat. My question is a little on a different piece. For the preliminary reviews, oh, I guess one other comment. I would also personally like to avoid making it too complicated. I would prefer it to be simple. It's like this, or it's like that, as opposed to, well, if you're 3 hours away, it's not, if it's this, like, all of a sudden, I feel that our, the constituents that come online are already, a lot of times they're confused by the process. I didn't know where to file, how to file, whatever. Let's not add to that confusion with this policy, right? Let's make it as simple as we can and still effective. And I'll go with my soapbox. My question is, why unanimous as opposed to majority to get director for the plan review?
Well, the unanimous vote was if we're gonna have a hearing.
Why not majority?
Just because, well, I was wanting to make sure that all commission members were on board with that manner of hearing, actually going through a full hearing.
Well, I guess if it's going through a full hearing or requiring it be in person versus online.
Well, what I'm saying is, what I think I was trying to say is, all hearings would be in person unless there was a unanimous vote of the commission to allow for it to be remote.
Exactly. Why not make that majority?
Because I wanted to make sure that all commission members wanted to have it in that manner, and not just a majority.
Why is that? I mean, if that allows one person to effectively block. I mean, I guess I don't understand why.
But yeah, I will say, yeah, effectively block, but it's a blocking because that person feels it's important to have people physically present before them to present their evidence on both sides of the case.
I mean, I will say, let me just kind of jump in here. And that's why I started to ask the question on that, just to kind of understand what it would mean. What my position would be is that all full hearings are in person. And it's not something, and the reason, I'm sure there's some circumstance that we could all think of that the full hearing could be virtual, but I think there needs to be simplicity and predictability. And it also, again, to your other point, it raises the stakes. And so if somebody comes out of preliminary, two parties that are at it, come out of preliminary hearing, and there's got to be a full hearing that they got to come in person and come to Columbus or come across the street, or the lawyer's got to come across the street or whatever, it does raise the stake. It could promote a settlement or dismissal or whatever. And Mr. Kreitz made reference to this, several times and different things like that. Having, and this Kaufman did as well, having people, witnesses and testifying and all that is just better in person. Is very, very difficult. Whether we get better technology or the bad technology we're using now, we're handling witnesses. And if you go back, if you think about some of the past cases that we've had where the people in person, seeing their reaction and how they were interacting with their lawyers as the trier of fact, I think those were really, really important that those people were there. We picked up different things, or it was easier for us to ask questions, or when we had to control the proceedings to shorten them or cut people off or things like that, a lot easier to do in person than it is virtual. So my position on that would have been for full hearings, they just need to be in person. Because I also worry about, whether it be on some type of review or whatever, that our decision or making it in person or not in person on an individual case, that turns into some big deal for somebody and another administrative thing that they file something in court against us or what have you.
Well, I actually see it the same way. That's why I was questioning it. Either make it a policy and there's no need for a vote.
It's simple, right?
Yeah, then it's simple. But if you're going to have a vote on anything, I don't think it should be required to be unanimous. That's the point of having a 7-person group, right? I mean, otherwise you've got blocking effects. I would highly advocate for just having it in the policy, and then there's no vote requirement. It's just always a person. Takes that all out of it. Again, that's my opinion.
And I don't necessarily disagree with that, and it's easy enough to potentially take that out. But at the same point, in order to give all of us a certain flexibility, I wanted to add that in to allow, let's say, a hearing if everybody, but as long as everybody decides that's what they wanted to do. And so that's the reason why I put it in.
I get it.
That's the reason why I put it
I get it. Thank you.
in. Mr. Chairman.
I've got several comments. First of all, I agree with Commissioner Tavares. With respect, I think we have two categories of cases here. We have final hearing type cases, which I think, based on the 4.5 years that Mr. Chair, you and I, and Vice Chair, I think those are the type of cases that absolutely have to be in person. They're a trial. And there's a lot to be said for being able to look at the witnesses as they testify, to hear the direct examination, the cross-examination of those people. And as one who chaired, this commission through part of the pandemic where we had actually remote hearings and we also had in-person hearings, the difference is night and day. I mean, when an exhibit is marked and handed to the witness, and then we, as the commission, have shared a copy of that, I want to have a copy of that exhibit in my hand as I'm listening to the testimony of the witness. So I think it's absolutely essential that we just all agree that all final hearings will be in person. All right. And then if we want to go ahead and carve out an exception, I can't really conceive of an exception, but I've been doing this for a long time. There always can be an exception. I think the general rule used to be it's in person. Every other category case, I see no reason why it cannot be remote, virtual. I think that we need to have some language in there that allows us in an exceptional case to be able to say, no, this was going to be in person. And I can think of a couple preliminary review hearings that we had. One of them was the mayor of one of the suburbs up in Cleveland, where it would have been really helpful, I think, from the very beginning, in talking about the preliminary review, to have had that in person. We didn't because of the pandemic. So every once in a while, there are cases that I think that are preliminaries that we want to see and we want to handle in person, and there probably needs to be a mechanism for that. But generally, the way I look at it is, number one, all final hearings are in person. Everything else is going to be remote or virtual. We want to do everything we can to encourage public participation in this body. I was really delighted, not by the pandemic, but by the effect of the pandemic on our hearings. We had people that showed up, that participated, people that were not actual parties or witnesses that wanted to listen in. I mean, that's what we should be all about in government. So I think we need to encourage that. So that's kind of where I lie with respect to those two items. Phil, the lawyer, can't avoid this, but, do we have statutory authority to do what we're talking about doing? I know you cited the public meetings law 121.22.
Yeah.
But I think what you're basically saying is that we're not denied the right to do that, so therefore we have permission to do it.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, are there any other statutes or administrative regulations that you found that would not arguably give us a problem?
Not of which.
Because I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we don't get jammed up down the
Right.
road by somebody raising legal arguments.
Right, not of which I am otherwise aware. Like I said, the statute specifically obligates all of us, I'll include myself. Maybe I can do it. To be in person.
Okay.
But it doesn't say anything about the fact that the public or anyone else appearing has to be physically present
Okay.
in order to present anything to a body.
Yeah, I'm not disputing what you're saying. I just
Right.
want to make sure that we're on sound footing legally.
Right.
Is this something we ought to run by the AG's office?
I
Just
thought about that, and
informally?
I certainly could, as we adjourn today, I could, I could always, I have not.
Yeah, I personally would like that. I'm
Okay.
only, in no way trying to undercut what you've represented to us as
No, that's
a council, but I think it's helpful in these days and times that,
Right.
we dot the i's and cross the t's, particularly with respect to our legal authority to do so.
Yeah, I'm in conversation with a couple of matters that are moving forward on either, appeals of decisions, et cetera, with some staff over there, so I could raise this, just
I would appreciate that.
as I'm having other conversation with him. And I would just say, considering where we're kind of, I think where we're kind of heading here, we could always not vote on this, not vote on doing this today, bring it back in August with a final version of this potential policy change. Take out the language which you're suggesting taking out, I can either leave in or take out the language about having remote hearings, allowing for remote hearings by vote, et
Well,
cetera.
yeah, I mean,
You know, so
I think we gotta have you do a rewrite. I mean, so I think that's the way we're headed. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, we finished.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I agree in principle with the policy and all the aforementioned comments, particularly Ms. Kaufman with the nuances. I think it's important that we do have hearings in person. And I agree with Mr. Beatty that I think it would facilitate settlement, that you do have them. I think we would lose that without having that. From a practical matter, I'm concerned that how do we do this with technology? Does everybody just bring their computers? So, for example, today, right, when Chris was up there, so I'm like we're looking at that little screen. That's not gonna work. I mean, just from a practical matter, we gotta figure out, and I don't want to bust the budget or whatever. I understand that, but I think we have to think about that, how we're gonna do that. Are we all then required to bring our computers or share computers? Because it's gonna be cumbersome to do it, in my opinion,
I
to
think
do
that-
it this way.
I think that that's a major consideration. I'd like to kind of defer to discussion on that point. That's something we're going to definitely have to address, no doubt about that. But defer a little bit, on that. Anybody have any other comments on, not on the technology, but on the substance here? Because I did have.
I had a question.
it's up to the chair.
No, go ahead.
My question was, and it went back to, if we're going to do it to allow everything, whether it's a general or disclaimer complaint or board referral versus just doing board referrals. My question was, when you've got a board referral and there's no argument back and forth, it is a referral that came to us, there's nobody arguing back and forth, it's strictly them addressing the commission, this is why I was late. Versus now, let's say you've got a G or a D complaint, and if we're allowing,
A what?
like the general complaints, or the disclaimer complaints. And so let's say you've got parties on both ends and, or on both sides. And now we've got one that wants to appear in person. Now we've got one that wants to appear remotely. Now,
Okay, that's actually was the point I was going to bring up.
okay.
That's the point I'm going to bring up, because if it's, I'm not in objection to, what Commissioner Tavares, Commissioner, Kreitz brought up. Let's just assume we go that way, that all the categories can be in, all the preliminary categories can be virtual. So then that does raise, obviously we have an exception if we say, hey, you gotta come in for this. But then we do have the issue of if, either both parties or one of the parties wants to come in, because one of the challenges when we were in the last 4 months is when we would have people here and then the rest of the people were on the computer and, it got a little bit, challenging, there. And I don't know if we would need to think of some type of procedure where they have to make a formal request to, appear in person, for preliminary review. Something like that, or both parties have to agree, or some, I'm whiteboarding right now, I'm not even making a suggestion. And I can tell you, lawyers, depending on their clients or whatever, may have different reasons for why they want somebody to, come in person, et cetera. It just, comes up with whatever, like, I want to walk that person in here, but make sure they're on time. We're gonna talk about it a little bit before, whatever, it's better physical rather than I'm relying on them to get on the computer all the time and things like that. And I'm not right there. Because many of our out of town litigants, they're using, Columbus-based lawyers, other things like that as well. But that's just a procedural thing to kind of think through. Again, I would hate for somebody to have to file something in another court demanding that they be allowed to come in, and that's what I know you were trying to cut off with.
Well, and I think, if I may, I'm sorry.
Please do.
You know, obviously, we're kind of a quasi trial, all right? We're not like a federal trial or a state court trial, exactly. But as you know, Mr. Chair, any party can come in and waive a jury. It only takes one. And now this is somewhat analogous to that. You know, I would believe we should have a policy in place if I, you know, had my way, where, you know, anything that was not a final hearing would be virtual. However, I think that you've got to permit one or both of the parties, if they desire to have it in person, I think we have to grant that to them. And I think that would be consistent with the way procedurally they do things, you know, in state and federal court. Again, I understand we're not technically a court, but I think we're analogous enough to that we have to follow those procedures. So I would favor that. I understand it's a good point, Chris.
I guess the only comment I would make with respect to the challenges we had with one party being in person and one party being virtual is that we weren't here. There were some of us that were here and the rest of us were online. So that's where the real challenge was with the reverberation with some people's computers. And it was more challenging because we weren't physically present here. You know, I think we are going to have to address the technology with respect to size and whether all of us have a laptop in front of us or iPad in front of us. But, you know, I think we just have to make the policy one way or the other. And the exception, I think I would tend to agree with the exception for all of those other cases, that they could be virtual, but still provide an opportunity if somebody wanted the other party to be physically present.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Jump back in.
I was gonna say, without jumping into the technology aspect too much, because
We're gonna come to that.
you know, I'm not too worried as far as that, because there are options that are open that we can discuss later that I think will be beneficial, save everyone from either having to bring their laptops or their iPads every week or every meeting. So.
If I may, yet, you know, I guess the deeper we go into that, and I still err on the side of not going that route, for reasons I mentioned on just opening up to more frivolous opportunities. But if we do, you know, that kind of reinforces Mr. Wrights's having reviewed by the AG's office on technical exceptions, because you know, I forget which one, but, you know, we get sometimes some fire and brimstone, this is not constitutional, and fairness and all that. My client was remote, but didn't want to come and all, you know, I know to the extent we can, I actually could go that route, we probably can avoid it, but we're gonna need ironclad policies and procedures to be able to combat those attorneys that start to go that route.
I'm sorry, unless I misunderstood a suggestion, I think that accomplishes that.
Yeah, I was just.
One or more party has to, if one or more party says they want to be in person, then both parties have to be in person. Is that a correct summary?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Fair enough, great.
in plain language, yeah.
No, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, if A and B, A wants to be in person, B doesn't. If A wants to be in person, whoever, I mean, that's gonna take the precedence. The person who wants to be in person, they both have to come.
Yes, correct.
I think that's a great idea. And then it just, you know, it just alleviates someone saying, well, that's not fair. I mean, if that's the policy, if one person says in person, then that's our policy and that's the way it is. So then.
Now, I mean, you have to, you know, Mr. Executive Director, I mean, you're going to have to come up with, you know, some other procedures around that, when that has to be done by,
Yeah.
all these other things. I mean, the day before, hey, I want to be there. Well, you know,
No, that's true.
sitting in the chairs
Right,
and
Oh,
being
yeah.
a little closer to the situation, they're dealing with a lot of same day, and day before, and 2 days before situations.
Speaking to that, I would like both parties in person, but to the matter of fairness and discretion, I feel like the and or option, even if we're hearing somebody in person and then hearing the other online, if that's their choice, then the onus is on them and not us I just, if we're taking less brunt of the decision making, that might be, so the way that's for this room. Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
well, there's not gonna, as I understand, there's not gonna be a situation where we're gonna have one person, one side in person and another side not in person. Everybody, if somebody says, I'm coming in person, both sides have to come. Now,
well, that's what we're saying. Yeah,
okay,
always the
there's some
benefit.
legal maneuvering, going back to lawyers where they're like, okay, we're gonna force it in person. That puts more financial pressure or
Well,
time
that's what I
pressure.
was gonna say.
But that's
yeah,
just,
For the
but-
other
but-
party
but
that may
that's-
not be as
but
well equipped.
that's,
Right.
but that's
So
litigation.
that's what I was thinking.
That's, if you're gonna
I
play in the
remember
lit,
running at night.
you're
too.
playing the litigation world, that's
I
part
guess.
of it. You would dispute that, that's just part of it.
Yeah, and an effect of that too, potentially, Mr. Chair, and it's not that we're trying to drive in this direction. If both the parties have to agree to be here in person, that may facilitate settlement as well, too. And that's not what our purpose is. Our purpose is making sure we have a fair hearing, we conduct a fair hearing. But if both parties feel that, they don't want to make the trip down, they may find some way to negotiate a resolution on that or two.
Yeah.
So I just see it very positive.
I mean, it's probably rare situations, but you would advantage participants who are closer to Columbus, right? If
Right.
somebody's close to Columbus, somebody's 3 hours away, they see I'm in the driver's seat if I just force a in-person because they've got to make a 6-hour round trip and I'm down the street.
Pre-pandemic, that's what had happened.
Well, yeah, but we're not
At
pre-pandemic
some point.
now, so.
Okay, that's true, but
And I would ask a question just about the integrity of the situation. I won't say which case, but there was a case in the viewing where it appeared that people were being cued and signaled as to what to say or how to respond. And in the event of that occurring, that's less likely to transpire in this room where everything is brought to full account, but are we allowing for more error on the part of anybody or just the opportunity to pervert the situation unintentionally on our part when it's not in person?
Well, I would think the nice thing about this is that if we develop a policy we all can agree with and we can implement, it doesn't mean that we don't review it. It may be one of those things that on a regular basis, we review it and tweak it as necessary. I think we're probably going to learn as we move down the road, whatever policy it is we adopt.
Which brought us to this point in having the conversation in the first place. It's a great point.
So basically rewrite this policy.
With all things considered. Please,
it's not gonna be, that's not only gonna be, that's only honest with you, but it's.
Yeah, I just, honestly, as I thought about this, I just wanted to get the conversation started. After thinking about what, other people have talked to me about in general conversation that we've all had at one time or another, it's like, okay, we need to address this somehow. And I knew that in a broad sense, everybody wanted to do something like this. And then it becomes a matter of, okay, how do we do it? And what are the subtleties and all those kind of things? I understand that.
We have to think about also now we've got this whole, what are they calling the replacements,
Oh, yeah.
that has to be weaved
Alternates.
into, the alternates, I'm sorry, that has to be weaved into this.
The
somehow.
alternates.
Yeah.
But the alternates are, I don't know, it's not even down that road yet. but-
Actually, that's better, this is better.
Well, they have to be physically present like us.
But
Yeah, that's right.
They have to be sitting out there waiting to, I refuse for some reason to replace me or.
In a situation I talked with the executive director about, what do you do if you're half a day into the hearing and all of a sudden somebody says something that says, I've got to recuse myself?
Right, right,
You can't proceed further based upon what my understanding is now.
right.
We've got to get the alternate in.
Right.
And that alternate's not going to be in a position to be able to make a decision unless he or she has a chance to review all the previous testimony. So there's going to be a lot of, not saying that we can't, won't implement it. There's going to be a lot of fine tuning of that for many years to come, Mr. Executive Director.
Because you
Not
didn't
a long
have
time.
enough to do.
been no formal announcement, but I don't think he's a long timer for years and years and years.
Depends on what you mean by a long time, but yeah. I am getting somewhat long in the tooth.
We all do.
Okay,
Understand.
Okay, so I think we've got our marching orders on this aspect of it. So now let's turn to, and I think best to let Chris start, the technological concerns, options, et cetera. But let's let you speak to the options first, or what you've been exploring, and then before we just jump in.
Okay. We had a few options open to us, when it came to, it would be very difficult for us to put a laptop in front of the lectern and everybody look at a 17-inch screen. And be able to discern what's happening on that end. So one option was potentially to get a projector that would project it, you know, that back wall where everybody can see it. You're not having to contort in order to be able to see the screen. A decent projector that would do what we would need. They can be fairly expensive. I mean, you could get something cheap for, you know, $100. You could get something that's $1,500. And so the other option would be to get a TV screen. Say, you know, and I'm just throwing this out, a 40-inch TV screen that we would carry up, sit on a table in front of the lectern. It's sitting right here. I'm controlling the computer. I'm putting who's on that screen before the commission. The microphone itself, as I'm using our Samsung Go mic, will pick up anything in the room so that they should have no issue hearing us. And with it only being one machine in the room, there should be no reverberations, no feedback, no echoing. It's just the one computer, one microphone. So I'm not too worried as far as those issues where during the pandemic where we would have, at one point, I think we had 4 or 5 machines within 5 foot of one another that it was like, wait, did you mute? You didn't mute. Oh, I muted, but then you forget to unmute. And so now they're all feeding back off one another. We shouldn't have those issues. As far as Teams, we're pretty much committed to using Teams. As the state said, this is who, you know, we have support for. You have to use Teams, so we're kind of tied. We did have an issue with Wi-Fi, which there was one meeting in particular that we really had an issue. Since then, it's been fine. I keep glancing at the computer to make sure that I'm not seeing. We haven't had issues as far as the connectivity problems. But I believe that having a TV directly in front of the lectern where they can see the full commission can see them, and the audio should be fine. In my own thought, that was kind of our best bet, our cheapest bet, because you can pick up a decent 40-inch TV for a decent price.
Right, but you're also, so, and then you have the webcam that's gonna be needed. We're not gonna do the web off the laptop that goes to the computer. We use the webcam. We'll have a separate webcam apparatus mounted on the TV, correct?
Well, and that's a good point. You know, otherwise the computer would still have to be set up there for the commission to be able to see.
But
Yeah,
I'm
so-
sure as Madam Court Reporter would tell us, I mean, you see, at least with, you know, law firms and other organizations that do a lot of video depositions or whatever. There's, you know, some pretty robust webcams with the appropriate microphones or whatever to be able to pick it up well enough or whatever. But that's the other piece.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please, go ahead.
If I may make a recommendation, because we have some experiential learning, we've gone through the learning curve with this at our very small ministry. We're national, but we're small. But when we had to deal with the pandemic, we were meeting remotely. And so we invested in something called the OWL. It's a $1,000 device, but it's able to be panoramic in nature and capture everybody in this board and have a full band screen for our participants to be able to see each member. And then in the event you're speaking, it hones in and focuses on you, pans you in immediately. So nobody's trying to physically provide that manual, you know, revamping of the option. So you're speaking, the OWL is on you as the main screen, in communication with whoever you're in communication with on the other side. It does the job of the microphone and the webcam. I think the TV is the option for all of us to be looking in the same direction. If you had a TV on this back wall, or even if you revert back to high school and you remember those days where the TV got wheeled in and it was like the best day of the week, if we had one of those with the flat screen on top safely secured, that could be remotely moved to the room that was necessary. And then you have your laptop right in front of you, so you can do what you need to do to adjust, but it reduces a lot of the complication with the owl, would just set essentially in the middle on a plant stand or whatever table. You can even have a cart for that too, but I think you're
Microphone
looking at.
aspect and,
It has everything. So you're really looking at probably a max $1,300 investment to do this really professionally. So everything on our end would be crisp and clear and concise. And then on their end, we can't control them. But as far as access and consistency, it eliminates all the human error, at least from our experience.
I love that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the exact same thing, but it's a bar and it, yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
It's a little creepy, but it is.
Yeah.
It is.
But it's
Just
creepy when
the
you
job
say
well.
something and all of a sudden it zooms in on you and that aspect.
Yeah.
It's a little weird, but at the same time, it's effective for what we want to do. I fully agree with that.
Yeah, only because we experienced, I mean, we had the iPhone sideways on top of something on top of the, I mean, we've done it all. So once we arrived there, we're like, tell everyone you know.
Yes.
So,
It's
but I don't know what the budget's like. Maybe we don't know. Maybe we're all chipping in,
I was
chipping in donation.
Yeah.
It would sound even more appetizing if that decimal place was moved over just one to the left.
Yeah.
You missed Prime Days, maybe they had it on sale.
Oh.
Well, if we ever have to
that's
talk
by
to,
Total Tech, that might get us 30% off, but it'll lapse in August, we gotta let it figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, Chris and I have had conversation, and as we talked it through, I think at least he and I have agreed that size television is a reasonable option to place it there in front. That way everybody can get a decent sized look at who's appearing before us when we do this. I like your suggestion on that. I'd never heard of that before, but certainly budget is a concern for us, yes. But we're early enough in this fiscal year. This is why I want to have a conversation with you as to whether to control the board. Because I'm gonna need to do that regardless. And this would just be another thing to add to that aspect of my approach.
How large was that budget, the increase we gave you on the raise last year?
It was too much. And so
After how many?
I'm gonna have to give some of that back. But no, well, honestly, what killed us in this last fiscal year was all the various transcripts we had to produce for appeals of our cases. Hicks and Freeman case being the most, which some of you guys don't know anything about that, but we had
11 meetings.
11 meetings, so it was around $2,000, $3,000 worth of transcripts that we had to produce,
Wait,
as part of the course.
the transcript for those 11 meetings, I think was 65 or
6,500.
7,000.
That's right. Yeah,
They're like 7,000.
It's not inexpensive.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we were in a difficult position as we came to the end of this year because of that whole figured out forward. Anyway, Chris and I we've had our conversations about that. And, we think we're coming up with both, I think, a cost-effective but appropriate way to make sure this handles properly. Because, yeah, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it in a total cheap manner. Of course, as Chris and I talked, and he got the information from, he was in contact with the state purchasing. And even they were suggesting, yeah, I mean, you could go out and buy a TV on your own, because trying to buy it through the state term contract would probably be like 4 times what we
Yeah.
go to Best Buy.
Yes.
And, it gets the exact same thing.
Anything else?
So anyway.
But the employees can't just buy coffee for breakfast.
No.
I'm not kidding. It has to, you have to buy a sandwich, throw the sandwich away if you don't want it to get it reimbursed, and that's not a joke. I just, what you said, I guess, I have to admit, I need to see it. I just, Teams, Zoom, I've never seen it work because of the microphone primarily, right? I mean, you just see people, whoever it's supposed to, you can't hear anybody else. So I'm just concerned if we went the Teams and TV route with the ability of people online being able to hear.
I definitely think that you'd have to have a professional setup. Ours is a bar. I don't know what yours looks like, but ours is a bar because we were remote for so long for all different things. And we have a big 70-inch TV that we just attached to the wall, but we have that bar that you just attach to it. It sits where everybody has visibility to it, or where it has visibility to you all, and it's exceptional. It really is.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, so I think that if we were going to do that, we would have to make, and I say we, and I feel bad because it's really Chris and Phil, but we have to make the commitment to like have the right equipment to do it, or it's really gonna be.
That's right.
It's gonna
That's
be,
right.
it's gonna be pandemonium.
Yeah,
right.
no,
And I'm sorry, I mean,
No.
and this, well, and I will say, I mean, this is not something that I've brought to you lightly and just thinking, oh yeah, we make this little policy change and we do a few here and there, it's ready to go. I mean, we're always going to have some of those concerns, and I think as Chris kind of said, the one time when we had a lot of problems, well, I don't even, the one time we had a lot of problems
We
in
had a
here.
lot of- we couldn't even get connected to the Wi-Fi, and I think that was our biggest problem was the building Wi-Fi, it wasn't the Teams or any of that, we couldn't even get
Right.
into.
But that, even that occurred when it was just you and I and Otto
Yeah.
in here. It was just the three of us, and there wasn't anybody else around. But yet.
That was
you
the
know,
time I had to run back to my office.
Yeah, exactly. But yet here we are today where you're on, or you were,
I'm,
right?
yeah, I couldn't have password.
Oh, that's right. You just- But I'm on and Chris is on there, and it hasn't been a problem. It hasn't been a problem at
Yeah,
all.
and there's no data ports on here that you can hardwire into here.
There are only 2 rooms on this floor that have actual plug-in, for internet, like Ethernet plugins. And those are the rooms that are extremely tiny, that's just got like 4 desks around.
can we get a really long cord?
I actually joked about that.
Probably under $100, you can get like an amplifier, basically a neural network type of a device that you can get that'll amplify the signal for the Wi-Fi. That is a relatively straightforward solution, I think, but we're spending your
For
budget.
security reasons, would the state allow you to do that though?
Yeah.
We're in a public hearing, I better be quiet. But I'm going to understand, you have to get, DAS to approve that it's, security. So that's a problem that shouldn't be part of things.
And I will say on the OWL,
I should.
if we do that, probably you would just want to have the audio off until the meeting actually is gavelled in, because the banter can be overwhelming if you're on the other side, because
Yes.
it tries to zoom in on everybody and it's like, it's not well received when you're because I'll work from home remotely and I'm like, I just hear everybody's jokes. It's a fun time. That's what it is.
And I alluded to this earlier, but is there a way, whether we go that, and it's my opinion, but we create a policy that just basically turns the chat off? Otherwise, we're monitoring the chat, which is an extra layer of complexity. Would the state allow us to turn it off? I know you can.
Yes, and in fact, just like today, you can turn that chat off in there. I never did prior, just because there are instances where, hey, John Smith, are you here for a particular case? And you can chat back and forth and say, yes, I'm here on this matter. Or, no, I'm just spectating. It's kind of nice to have, but there are circumstances, like one in particular meeting that we did have, where it had to be disabled. And so if the commission chooses to go that route, I can disable the chat on all future meetings, just so that it's not an issue.
Well, we wouldn't be able to see it, so,
Yeah.
we create an even greater opportunity for those that are on it. Here's a chance to score political points with whoever's online, and we wouldn't have any idea what's happening, so.
That ugly, really, that one
Yeah.
meeting got really ugly.
was the one with the cowboy governor.
Yes, it is.
Right, I'm sorry, Joe, something, I apologize, it's just how I remember it.
Cowboy governor.
Well, it's not like a Mike Pence thing.
I say that with all due respect, but it's okay. Hey, I say it with all due respect.
It's-
I just like.
That was a
I think-
great-
I think-
All right, any more discussion?
Yeah, it feels like we're.
Okay,
Bill, thanks a lot for
Phil, Chris, you understand what we need to
Yes,
do?
Yes,
Phil, and if you get to this early, please circulate it. Go ahead.
Oh, gosh, yes. I'll start working on some of the aspects about which we've spoken. And then, anticipate this being on the next meeting. Whether it's an attempt to finalize this or just keep the process moving forward. And the other thing I will add.
Hold on. I got one question. So, Mr. Kreitz, do you feel as though get your draft done, circulate it, and then let's try to get it to the attorney generals prior to the August 18th meeting?
Well, I was planning on essentially taking this draft, because this is about as basic as you can get here, and forwarding the aspects of it, and to ask them, just because the generalized question is it okay for us to do that?
I just
And then
get,
as we
on
move-
I just get on the phone, Bill. and-
Yeah, I
And
would-
say, look, this is what we're contemplating.
Right.
Or kind of lay out what the conversation was today and see what they seem to say.
Yeah.
And then if they are favorable, then put it in writing and we can proceed from there.
Yeah, we're gonna try to keep it as simple as possible. Lost the thought.
Thanks for raising the issue, Phil. I mean, this is a really important issue, I think. Thank you for the conversation.
It has been something that had been, like I said, raised with me or raised with us various times, and it's, in realizing it. The one thing I will say now, realize, considering that, like last week, everybody always asks me, oh, how long is the meeting gonna last? It's been a constant over all the time I've been involved with the commission. And I've been generally pretty good at putting out, okay, it'll be this long or this long. If we had cases involving Mr. Bry and Mr. McTighe, I always said, at least double the amount of time, because, those two going back and forth, I got pretty good at that. But like, if you think back to the last, 2 weeks ago's meeting, where it was all similar to this, it was all stuff in campaign finance filings. And normal, and you see like here today, we went through this in 15 minutes, probably. We're looking at an hour and a half, 2 hours. By the time we deal with everybody that logs in, and we go through all those cases, give them an opportunity to present to the commission. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it is one of those things where it's what's going to happen.
Yeah, but I'm not concerned with that or whatever. I mean, as long as I think we got improved over time,
Agreed.
saying, okay, let's see all who's here, what case are you on, get those people going. And then if there were some stragglers, then we'd say, Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith, Mr.
Right. No.
Everybody. I thought we did really well with that. I don't really see that as an issue.
No, and I don't know that it is either, but it is one of those things that's like, today we got, obviously the conversation has now lasted another hour or so, which is good. But it's like, business wise, we got done in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we listen,
You have
I
people
mean,
coming forward, it's gonna take more time. I think it's appropriate for us
I
to
just
deal with
want
it that
to
way.
just always keep in mind, however, is, we do live in a world of convenience and technology and everything.
Yep.
But there's certain things in the world when you choose to participate or when you're forced to participate or whatever, it's just going to be a little bit longer.
Yep.
It's going to be some inconvenience. It's part of it. If you're in litigation, hearings,
Yep.
something's filed against you, it's just part of it.
Yep.
I mean, yes, when I hear somebody, oh, we came from Ashtabula and they're sitting back there and
goes
it's
that
2
quick.
minutes or something like that,
Yeah.
you have to feel a little sorry. But unfortunately, that's just part of it.
Agreed.
I would suggest, this is maybe premature, but I would suggest that if people are going to attend remotely, that they be on by 9:45 so that makes Chris's life way easier.
I tell everyone that when we were doing
I agree with you.
in virtual, please log on 15 minutes prior, because I said, generally, when we come up here, I forward the phones to my cell phone, and I said, because I can help walk you through getting logged on if you're having an issue, what you need to do. Because if you wait until 10 o'clock and the meeting started,
Chaos.
yeah, it's much more difficult. So that is kind of
They should have to almost notify you if there's a way to just directly message the host with their name present.
Yeah.
And if it was 15 minutes in advance, then you have a running list of who's present. That way we're not, are you there? Are you at, because you're trying to go through all these Zoom screens.
Or
And
you
I
don't
don't know
have your
about
name
you
on
guys, but so often I could not see nearly anyone. And I'm like, I don't know. So I could hear it.
Well, I will say too, thank you all for your thoughts, opinions. I mean, you're the, as I always tell everybody, you're the commission. and So you're the ones making the decision. I'm just here to help you get in the position to do that. So thank you all for your feedback, for your interest and for your suggestions. I look forward to getting this done.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I have a question on this topic, if you don't mind.
That was
I had a couple of questions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So,
Sorry.
I was just wondering, how often does the commission review, for lack of a better term, the matrix on fines? Right, you know, when does a $50 fine due to inflation and time pass become 75, you know, that type of thing? You know, when do we review those types of frameworks?
statutory.
No, first off, I'll answer that one, no. All right, well, if you're ready for the history here.
Well, let's say
No,
this.
let's say.
No, you know what, you guys, you know I love to
In
talk.
the last 2
I
years,
know.
we did review it.
Right. I,
Well, that's all I was gonna do is say, from the time I started here, I had kind of, in 96, I started establishing, you know, how we set up things and how we find amounts here, good cause here and all that kind of stuff. And it was about 2.5 years ago when your predecessor primarily, but all the commission members at the time said, we need to rethink how you're approaching this. And the bottom line that came out of that was, we're still good with good causes, as you saw today, but you need to be increasing the fines and you need to be thinking a little more harshly about how you go about approaching some of these cases. Because pretty much anybody who filed a report and submitted a response, even if it was like the guy who filed the response and his report and filed it was a good cause. Because that's the policy that I had just kind of created and ran along with it. Commission members have said, no, you need to be a little bit more determined in how you approach it. And so we did that again about, I think it was October of 2020, November 2020, when things changed and I've been a little bit more firm and more fines have been imposed in that interview period. So we did that, but that was like I said, that was 2 years ago. So essentially every 25 years, I guess. We need to review, but that's what it was. And so, you know, if you guys want to bring that back up on an annual basis or, you know, something like that, I have no problem with that. But that's the history. It's a relatively short history. I didn't go into.
But may I add that the discussion was had that we were really just trying to get people into compliance.
Right.
We're not
Oh, yeah.
trying to be, you know, to be harsh. We want there to be repercussions and for them to know that it's, you know, that way it's not gonna be recurring with certain people, which it is, and some people they learn the first time, but the whole point is that we want compliance.
Right.
So I think that's the reason why there are a lot of good cause and, you know, I think our executive director's been amazing at being able to look through and see and his judgments are 99.9999% we all agree with and are spot on, so.
Well, I wasn't gonna disagree, I just, you know, as you go to the pump and gas is going up and everything's going up and just was curious what our policy was for
Maybe we
reviewing.
can find
And that,
lots
and,
of
and
that.
so you've got where it came from, and it's only been about a year and almost a 2-year period where it has
The
changed.
fact that you can go, they'll be able to go virtual, that balances off.
So anyway, that's, anytime you.
Well, I was half expecting to hear it's been 15 years, because that's just the way the state typically works.
You know what, right, we
And
gotta,
that's
we gotta pay
honestly the way it
we gotta
was.
pay for the owl.
None of the pumps come here.
Yeah, they have to put together a budget.
No, part of the fine amounts that we impose come back to the commission.
Oh, well then,
See, I thought-
technology fees.
Find it when you come back.
To the journal, and then you have to submit a budget.
I do, yeah, I'll pay for it, go back home.
Our GRF amount is about 2/3 of the total budget of the commission.
All
right.
1/3 is out of the commission.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
All right, Commissioner, go ahead.
No, I was.
No, hold on. It was- Right here. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's not-
No, go ahead.
So I had two questions, but along those lines that Ernie just brought up, my understanding was that we were gonna review the penalty structure. Mr. Kreitz had raised that up.
That's in August.
Yeah, aren't we
Oh,
gonna do that?
the fine amount, yeah, I have not yet gotten to touch with the AG's
Right.
office to have
We were-
their folks come up.
Well,
with it, but I
not so
anticipate
much
doing it.
just the fine amounts, but the way that penalties are meted out. I thought that's what we had talked about. Am I wrong there?
No, I think, I had simply asked that we take a look at how many, the amount of the fines we have, what steps are being taken to collect and things of that nature.
Right.
And we do that every couple of years.
Okay, I guess then I misunderstood. I thought how you reach your decisions, I thought we were gonna talk about that. We're not, obviously not gonna talk about.
That is a discussion that we had last year.
You guys had that last year,
Yeah.
okay, then I was just thinking for the new members, for at least for myself, I know when we go and we look at priors, I guess I'd pick this up, I don't know, but it seems to me that if somebody has a prior, if it's more than 5 years, you don't consider that. Is that accurate? But I wouldn't know that
Pretty
other
much,
than
yes.
sitting in a meeting,
Well, you
picking that up, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
unless you just call Bill, he'll go through it with you.
Right.
Go to
Well,
lunch.
no, we have, but I thought, okay. So that's fine. And then number two, I know I was on the industrial commission nominating committee prior to this meeting, and we were required to have ethics class. So this would not be the commissioner or the attorneys, but you should do that on your own, right? But for the new members who are not attorneys, are we still required to
Yes,
take an ethics class every year?
yes. You're
Because I
right.
haven't heard.
They've done a lot of that online. I will forward it along to all of you.
Are we just grandfathered?
Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. I will forward
Oh,
along to
no.
you
It's
the
fine.
information that I get from,
Unfortunately.
the folks over at the Ethics Commission, because most of that you can do online.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did it when I was over there, but
Right, when
we
you're
just
signing
never
your-
talked about this
You read
committee if
through
we had
all
to
of
do it.
the Necessary documents before you pay your ethics commission fee. I mean, at least I did. So
I'm
maybe,
sorry.
does that qualify when you're paying your fee to be?
No, you have to go through the
You
training.
have to go
Okay,
through
there's
the-
that. Well, I don't know. I'm just asking.
What's the
To
last
read
training we
the
had?
inside.
Was it the DEI training? I think that's the last training I think we had,
What's DEI?
division equity.
No, diversity, equity.
I'm sorry, okay, okay, okay.
That's what we're trying to do.
That was a one-time. Whereas the ethics office is already in school, and I don't know that I circulated that.
Straighten up everything.
Sure.
I forgot about that.
That's a different debate, not for the matters.
That's one
No,
thing.
but I never had the feedback, we had to turn our certificate in, you and I had a hard time getting on to the.
Right.
But I don't,
That was just a one-time thing.
right.
Yeah, it may be helpful as, yeah, for new members, just a checklist. of-
Yeah, what we're
But I thought we
required.
sort of had, and I thought,
Yeah, there is an ethics training obligation every year or two.
It's every year.
I think it's every year.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
I will
that's all I
send
need.
along to you information that I get from the person that I've worked with over at the Ethics Commission. for
Okay.
years.
All right, thank you.
She's a great lady.
And if you want, when you get your certificate or whatever, you can pass that on to the executive director, he'll put it in your file.
Put it in the personnel file, and you're all
Gotcha.
taken care of. That's
And the
fine.
committee on committees.
That's what I do.
It's over for the-
That's device.
Get it in there, because I'll forget.
Pretty much.
I have one other question, and I know that you guys are gonna kick me off as a new member for asking another question at the end. But do we have any feeling or any anecdotal data that suggests a transformation in any way, one way or the other, on collection of fees or lesson fees awarded for the people showing up? Because obviously it's tenfold, or 100% attendance online versus 0 today in person. Are we providing more grace because we hear people, or is it just, are you still any differential on the actual actionable item versus them getting the opportunity to be present? Like, is it changing the outcome for them really in any way?
I guess what I would offer is, in a grand sense, it's relatively minor, but I'm certain that there have been those times when someone makes a personal plea, good word, a personal plea or discussion with the commission that I may still say, my recommendation is a $50 fine, and the commission then goes on to say, okay, no, we're gonna find good cause. It happens, but it is probably a minority of cases in which that occurs. You know, like if we have 10 $50 fine items or $100 fine, maybe one of those or two in a particular meeting, that might occur.
So it's a pretty minuscule differential from
Yes.
outcome, an outcome.
That is aside from the persons that, you know, we don't have a response from, they appear, and that changes my recommendation because they
Right,
made a statement. These are the ones where I still say, no, I still think it would be $50. I will just say that's where I'm trying to make you all look good, because I get to be the bad guy then and say, I'm imposing a fine. And you guys then turn around and say, no, we're gonna go with cause, and then they all walk away thinking, well,
Like one great
that
commission.
executive director is a real, yes, boy, the commission
They have
members
their heads.
are right on top of things, and they understand. And so that's, I'm more than fine with that. More than fine with that. But that's I'd say that's a minority of times when that occurs.
Sorry, thank you.
5, 4, 3, 2,
Mr.
1.
Chair,
Is there?
Oh.
not for today, not for today, but I know that all of the commissioners are looking forward to your report on the Christmas party that we're gonna have in December and what your plans are. So, nope, maybe next month.
You know, waiting
It'll
on,
be Christmas party with this size with the dinner.
I'm waiting to see if the technology is in place first.
It's gotta be a good one.
Yeah, the 2 years.
We're gonna blame the
I
budget on
believe
the
that.
house, so-
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't hold your breath. We're gonna, it's a very, bring your own lunch, snack bag.
All right.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Am I allowed to do that?
Yes,
You just did.
Yes, non-debatable.
all in favor?
Aye.
Know what you do?
Oh, goodness.
Good seeing everybody.